Welcome to this episode of Modern Sales Wisdom, the podcast. On today's episode, we're going to be speaking about recruiting or finding your ideal job if you are the candidate and what it takes in order to get it. We're going to be speaking about skills, what kind of characteristic make a great salesperson, and also how you identify that or show that as a candidate. Let's welcome the absolute expert on this field, Zaid.
And what I mean by opportunistic is that they just kind of like jump on the next opportunity that feels right for whatever reasons, but they haven't connected it to themselves on a deeper level. Obviously, the other part are then the character traits that we discussed earlier. And in that context, it really makes sense to define what traits do I as a company, I as a hiring manager really do see as important and to then evaluate based on this. I guess what's worth to mention here at this point is that
this conversation with Zaid is super timely, and I take a lot from these kind of conversations because he gives me an idea of where I want to travel to, what an ideal situation should look like, how I can get there, and he gives me inspiration, wisdom, and this is what this podcast is for. Modern Sales Wisdom. This is what we share with you, the audience, the listener, or the watcher on YouTube. So if you haven't done so, I would love you to press that subscribe button, and maybe even if you want to engage, leave a comment, reach out to Zaid or me via LinkedIn. If you want to get in contact with us, down in the show notes, you're going to find all our contact information. Now, let's get into this inspiring conversation about recruiting, about finding ideal candidates, being an ideal candidate. Let's go. Enjoy. Zaid, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. We'd love to explore the depth of what makes great salespeople, what is the wisdom that they share, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Maybe we kick it off with an opening question. What do you think makes a great salesperson?
First of all, I appreciate the invite, Henry. And yeah, what makes a great salesperson? I guess there's three main character traits that I see that really differentiates A players from everyone else. And the first one is high energy, charismatic. The second one is definitely hungry. People in that space are definitely go-getters. And the third one is resilience. So really getting up again when, receiving rejections and everything like that. And obviously there's a spectrum of all of these character traits. And I guess the best salespeople are on top of the spectrum on all these three traits. That's what I see.
Interesting. There's no craftsmanship or skill, so it's really you look a lot into like the characteristic, the intuition, and you think the rest can be learned on this podcast or other places.
Yeah. I mean, I'd definitely say there is a strong kind of like foundation needed to actually form an unexperienced salesperson into a great salesperson. These are those types of character traits. I'm not saying that you cannot improve them, but it's definitely easier to improve the actual kind of like skills and frameworks and everything that you would apply on a daily basis.
And I mean, you're working in recruiting. You have a great sales career behind you and also ahead of you. I mean, it's very sales related recruiting, I think.
Exactly.
And I've met you, so I know it's very much in your nature as well, being a very outgoing, very positive person. What do you think the market needs right now? Because my feeling is, and I'm just curious about that, when I speak to other people, it's always about structures. It's about implementing sales strategies or sales motions. Or is that something which you experience companies of different sizes start to adapt at different points? Just curious to understand what kind of salespeople are used or needed for what kind of companies and the market right now, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's a twofold question that focuses on two different areas. I, in the first place, find it an interesting observation that you hear a lot about process and system implementation, because that obviously kind of like indicates that there would be a focus on leaders, sales leaders, and those sorts of profiles. What I see in the current market is there's a very strong need for high performing individual contributors. It's actually a tough market right now for leaders to find a new job. And again, like there have been many layoffs and all that stuff. We've heard enough about all of that. And what I see is that sales leaders actually struggle the most to land a new gig because the opportunities are not as plenty at the moment. And when it comes to the IC profiles, what I do see in the market is that the the understanding from sales organizations that a seller actually needs a strong outbound muscle has definitely increased. Over the past, I'd say, couple of years, there's definitely been a very strong split between obviously SDRs, BDRs, and AEs, and then obviously later on also customer success. And I do see quite a trend towards full cycle account executives. So really, you know, bringing the skills or the experience as well to cover the full cycle. That's kind of like what I see in the current market.
And with that in mind, what sets you up as a great candidate for, on one side, to be seen for these companies as a full circle AE? How do you well, how do you position yourself as an individual contributor, as a sales expert? And because selling yourself is usually the hardest part for
Yeah,
many people.
interesting. And I think the selling yourself part is probably one of the main areas here, in different ways actually, because selling yourself happens in multiple like parts of the journey, and that's kind of like how you as a candidate should also view an interview process. It's basically like handling your own sales pipeline, right? You should, in the first place, have not just one opportunity in your pipeline, but ideally multiple opportunities if you're seeking to find the best opportunity for yourself. And then when it comes to selling yourself, yes, in fact, it really makes a difference to have a solid LinkedIn presence, which doesn't mean you have to be kind of like the next LinkedIn influencer. That's not the case, but have a profile that actually represents your strengths and kind of like underlines the trajectory that you've taken over the past couple of years. What I mean by that is also kind of like optimizing your titles, for example, right? There's like so many different titles in sales. And if you're looking for an AE position, rephrase your previous sales manager role or business development manager role or whatever it is to an account executive role to make you, as relevant as possible for the hiring manager, the recruiter, whoever is looking at your profile. And do yourself a favor and make their job easy by also, filling in details about your achievements on your profile. What I mean by that is quantifiable, measurable achievements in your roles. Those can be things like target achievement, revenue closed, customer closed, average deal cycles, average contract values, and those types of things. Because even within SaaS sales, there's quite a bit of a difference in different sales motions. Some sales organizations are very transactional, some are more enterprise focused. And those organizations need different profiles. Yes, from a personality perspective, but also from a background perspective. And if you kind of like underline what you bring to the table, what is the value that you kind of like bring to the organization that you're potentially applying for, that you get recommended for, then that is a big step ahead already. And then the other part is being crystal clear on what does your ideal future look like? What does your ideal role, company, opportunity look like to make sure you align these? Because you don't want to just like walk around like a headless chicken applying for different types of roles just because the titles sound fancy or the OTE sound promising or whatever. You want to make sure that your next opportunity actually moves you forward, not only in your career, but actually in your life as well.
There's a lot of golden nuggets in this conversation. I'm really enjoying this. I'm
Appreciate that.
curious to understand. I mean, there's a lot of, work from anywhere. Um, we give our people the highest amount of freedom, and then on the one hand you hear that, on the other hand you hear a lot of return to office.
Yeah.
Especially in the sales environment, I hear, well, we have a hybrid approach where we think it's important that a few days a week the salespeople get together to build the momentum, to build the spirit as a team. What is your observation at the moment? Um, what's the general market feeling really doing? I have the feeling we're not really decided yet.
Well, I mean, I think that's a topic that will always be in motion. So what's true today might not be true in 12 months from now, right? So I don't think there is a decision in that sense. Um, it's also more kind of like adapting to the market. I guess one of the main reasons why we went remote was because the market was demanding it, right? Um, because at some point, talent would not accept a role if it's not at least hybrid, but ideally remote. And then the market has obviously turned a little bit, whereas companies can be a little bit more selective, a little bit more picky about who they want. And their personal preference is having someone in close proximity who they can see on a regular basis because companies believe in collaboration and those types of things, at least still the majority of the companies. And I get, I get both points, to be honest. I think it also depends a little bit about what is the culture that we as a company represent. And if we don't truly believe in remote work, it doesn't make sense to just offer remote work to kind of like get the best talent, because you won't deliver these talent a great experience working remote, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense, and I'm still a little undecided on my personal belief on this, and I think it
Yeah.
also depends on the experience of the person that you're trying to acquire to come to the company. And
Totally.
I see that especially during COVID and the transition and the teams that I've managed in that time, that the level of upskilling or the speed of upskilling, which we're seeing within the teams of young talent, is definitely not in is not as fast as it used to be, and especially in the remote spaces. And it's hard to see as a leader, hard to see the gaps that your team has if you're not in the same room. And so it's really important that hiring process is completely spot on.
Mm.
I mean, apart from selling yourself, what do you think companies need to look out for in the hiring process to really identify these blind spots? Is that something which you help with as well, identifying the skill, or is those you recommend assessment centers to really dig in and to understand, does the person understand the craft? Um, Curious on your thoughts on that.
Yeah, interesting. I feel like it's 10 years ago since I heard the term assessment center the last time. So yeah, I'm not sure if I want to pick this up in detail. But when it comes to, I guess, um, my involvement when I work with clients, it's definitely very much a strong pre-qualification, right? So in
Mhm.
the first place, when I sit down with a client, I have a very in-depth kickoff session with them where I fully understand the company culture, the role requirements, kind of like the personality requirements. And I don't just kind of like take these requirements with me, but I also do challenge the client on these requirements. And we jointly craft a profile that makes sense for their current stage, for what they're trying to achieve, right? And then I will basically find talent who's in the first place excited about the mission and the product of the company and the culture and everything like that. And secondly, also qualifies from a skill perspective, but also from a personality perspective, right? So when clients work with me, they would usually speak to, on average, 5 candidates, and will be able to make one hire out of that. And how we achieve that together is by, you know, pre-qualifying all these requirements in the first place. That's not necessarily done by assessment centers or any sort of that. Yes, some of my clients, they actually use personality tests to kind of like shortcut the process a little bit. And I think personality tests can be quite powerful and oftentimes terrifyingly accurate, actually, which I guess everyone knows who's done personality tests themselves. But yeah, I guess again, like the culture of companies is different, and so should also be the interview process different for different companies. However, what I strongly recommend is being consistent with the interview process within an organization. Um, I think that's an important point.
And as the company that is hiring, how do you make sure you actually find the right candidate? I mean, there's a lot of skills that you expect people to have if they're working remote, and you expect them to bring it because it's hard to train them on the job if you are remote. What? How do you ensure you have the right candidates?
Yeah, I guess it can be a combination of things. And also, I think an interview process will vary from company to company, right? So not every company would kind of like pursue the same type of process. What I strongly believe in is that it's definitely crucial to really understand first for yourself as a company, what is the right skill set. Now you recognize I'm talking about skill set first before talking about character traits, because every sales motion is different. If you're selling transactionally, if you're selling in an enterprise environment, the person needs to bring a different type of experience. Yeah. And obviously, the other part are then the character traits that we discussed earlier. And in that context, it really makes sense to define what traits do I, as a company, I, as a hiring manager, really do see as important, and to then evaluate based on these. Um, I guess what's worth to mention here at this point is that with the clients that I work with, I really do an in-depth onboarding session with them where I fully understand the company culture, but also obviously the role requirements and everything that comes with that. And usually on average only present 5 candidates to a client, out of which they would be able to make one hiring decision. And that's only possible because I do pre-qualify on a lot of things before even presenting the client, right? To make sure that the candidate is actually excited about the company, the job opportunity itself. And then secondly, also brings to the table what they're looking for in terms of skills, but also character traits. And most importantly to me personally, also making sure that the opportunity itself is really a step up for that person.
I fully understand that. Um, Looking at, you know, you said stepping up. You've also mentioned it's all about finding your inner, what does your ideal future look like? Do you think a lot of people know what they're looking for? Or is it also your job as a recruiter or as a company to paint that idea into the people's head and say, listen, these are opportunities, what your life should look like, not only what this role should look like?
Mhm. I will definitely never tell anyone what their life should look like. I'm not in a position to do so. Um, And to your question, I think it also very much depends on at which stage in their career are they, right? Are they graduates and haven't even like asked themselves these types of big questions, or are they more advanced? What I will definitely say is that even people who are experienced oftentimes don't really know what their life looks like and are very opportunistic about their career. And what I mean by opportunistic is that they just kind of like jump on the next opportunity that feels right for whatever reasons, but they haven't connected it to themselves on a deeper level. Um, and yes, I do ask people that I work with deep questions at times. And at times we kind of like get in touch again further down the line, obviously, once they have actually figured out these big questions for themselves and have more clarity around what they're actually looking for. And then it might be a good time to actually pick up the conversation and, find the right environment for these people. What I will add actually is that usually the people that we categorize as A players, right? Whatever that means. Um, I would say they're usually quite good and have a very good understanding about who they are and who they want to be in the future. Um, but even with, great talent, there's definitely room to explore. And yes, it's part of my job to actually help them guide to that direction.
I have one question about that A player before I say thank you, Said, and that is, how many A players do you think are there? And I find this so difficult to think about because obviously, I mean, Steve Jobs says you only want A players because once you hire the first B player, it starts going down the drain. Is having A players also something that you as an organization can facilitate to create some kind of pressure pots, or, like we are all like unbelievable individuals? Or do you think it's like a percentage of the market and you just have to try to have not 5% in your company, but like 7? And if you've managed that, then you are like already 20% ahead.
Mhm. Yeah. When you asked the initial question, how many A players are there? I was literally put back into an interview situation because it very much feels like a brain teaser question where you don't come up with some sort of estimations and math and stuff like that. And I always hated questions, honestly. But yeah, I mean, it's obviously a fraction of the market, right? I mean, that's for sure. What I will also say is that, and in the first place, I do hate that term. I
Yeah.
use it, I use it only like very occasionally. I'm not a big fan of the term, but what I will also say is that there is possibility to develop A players, they obviously, they're not necessarily born as that. If you bring the right foundation, and those are kind of like the character traits that we discussed earlier, then you can develop people into A players, considering you as a company are the right environment and you actually set them up for success, which also means you have a strong product to sell, you have a strong onboarding program, a strong leadership level who actually acts as coaches and all of that. Because A players don't necessarily, grow on trees.
So thank you so much for this conversation. Before I ask the last question, I want to say I really sincerely think this is a huge value, this conversation that we're having, especially to the people looking in the market, because it is such a diverse market. And when we first got in contact to each other, you said a few things which really stuck with me, which is, and you've kind of manifested them this in this conversation as well. We think it's all about knowing where you want to go, understanding the lifestyle which you want to lead, being your authentic self, and only then you can really live to high potential and live on that kind of um on that sales level as well. And I find this great, and it, I would trust you to source for people, and I hope, of
I
course,
appreciate.
that I hope, of course, that many people reach out to you, and I wish you lots of success, continued success with that. Looking one step back in your sales career as well, what is one thing that you wish you would have known at the beginning of your sales career before, or that you know now that kind of would have helped you along that way?
Yeah, that's a big question, an interesting question that I probably would even need some time to reflect on. Um, because there's nothing I do regret. I've definitely taken ways that weren't the quickest way to get me where I am today. Um, in fact, I always had a strong entrepreneurial urge and always wanted to run my own business. But I've decided to be employed for 7, 8 years before actually properly, taking the leap and actually do so. Um, and I guess my career in sales taught me a lot to actually now be successful in what I do today. And I think one of the most important parts is actually be bold and be you, and, you know, do what actually brings you closer to the future that you want to live.
Awesome. I love it. Thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a really great pleasure. I think if people want to reach out to you, LinkedIn is probably the place to find you. That's where I found you, and we got in contact the first time. And you're very active there as well. So I suggest everybody to look into the show notes, and they'll find your link there to connect. Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. And I hope to see all of you guys on the next episode. Thank you. Take care. Bye bye.
Thank you so much, Henry. Have a good one.